Hi there, James here, welcome to another video. So something a little bit different this time. While building the Wasp recently, I did a bit of weathering, the rusting on the sides of the hull. I had quite a few comments on the channel and also on the Facebook page about how exactly did I go about doing that. So I thought I'd give you a bit of a tutorial. It's not the definitive way to add rust, but this is the way that I did it. It seemed to work quite well. So let's get started. So you need a bit of preparation before you start adding some weathering to your model. First of all, you need to finish it, obviously, and then secondly, you need to make sure that your model is well and truly covered in varnish. You're going to put some oil paint onto the model. You don't want to ruin any of the paint. So at least 2, maybe 3 coats of a gloss varnish. Always works better with gloss. Let it dry, but also give it a good sort of 24 hours to properly cure and harden up so it's nice and safe, and then you can get started. So as I said, we're going to do some oil paints. So I've put a few here. This is what I used recently. So it's got some Avidlung dark rust colour, so lovely rich deep rust. That's quite useful there. Also have some Winsor & Newton raw umber, a bit of a lighter colour rust. And lastly, to try and make it sort of stand out a bit, we've also got a Winsor & Newton, this time cadmium yellow deep hue. So we mix these up and put it on the model. Now the good thing about oil paint is it takes a really long time to dry. So if you're used to acrylic paint, which dries within a few sort of 10-15 minutes, it's pretty much dry. Oil paints can take up to a couple of days to dry. So especially on a nice summer's evening like this, it makes things a little bit easier. So what we're going to try and do is basically mix up our palette here using an old piece of card into a nice rusty colour. Sure the paint's all nicely blended. You can keep sort of changing it, but you can see you don't really need an awful lot of paint. You can make some nice colours out of this. But try and be consistent, so you don't want to have sort of flecks in the paint of different colours in case this orange here will really stand out. Let's do it properly. There we go. We've got our dark rusty colour with a bit of a dark hue, but also some nice bright colours in there. So smooth out your brush, get it all loaded up, and then we'll go back over to the Enterprise and we'll start applying this. Okay, so here we are. So you might be able to catch it to the light. The grey hull of the Enterprise now, I have already obviously done a bit of weathering, you can see by the rust in here, but add a bit more so it's safely behind 3 coats of Humbrol gloss varnish. What we're going to do is add some rust to some of these little vents here. So you've got this sort of the water entrance here, some of the bits where the ropes come on where they tie the ship up, maybe a bit on the anchor. I'll give you a bit of an overview as to how to do it here, work the way through the rest of the model, and then you can see how it goes. So we've got some on our brush. Let's get started. So what we want to try and do is just add a little bit onto where you want the rust to go. So it's obviously going to come down out of these holes, it's not going to go up. Gravity doesn't work that way, as you can imagine. You want to sort of start it off with where you want your rust colour to go. You don't need to paint all over it. Just get it started, because the magic happens when you try and pull it down a bit later on after it's started to dry. But there, and the anchor. And obviously the Enterprise is a very old ship. By the time it was decommissioned, it had been in service since the mid-1960s. So you can imagine it gets a bit of rusting every now and then. Obviously it gets repainted, which is why it doesn't always look completely filthy. We'll try and add a bit here and there. Okay, so there we go. So what we're going to do is leave this to dry for about half an hour maybe, and then we'll come back to it and then we'll start the next phase of the operation. Okay, so fast forward half an hour and we are now ready to try and streak our rust. So you need a couple of cotton buds or Q-tips, depends where you are in the world, and some thinners. We've got here some slightly dirty one that I've used specifically for this. So you dip your cotton bud in the thinner so it's a bit nice and wet, and then basically very carefully, so you don't knock your model off, put the cotton bud just above where the now painted oil streak wants to be and then drag it down. Now, it's a bit of a practice and you just need to get used to it a little bit. It's hard to explain on a video, you just need to have a little practice yourself, but basically you sort of streak it down, keep going down. Obviously it doesn't go up because of gravity, and then there's always this adage, less is more, so you can always go back and add a bit more, but try not to overdo it in the first place. So we just sort of gently streak away, and you can see that over time, every little stroke, it stretches down where the rust is and starts to make a bit of a difference. There's a good blob there. So, I made a bit of an error, so you can see that this stuff actually is quite forgiving. And it's just go. So always try and remember that rust wants to go down, not sideways like I just did there, straight down. Let's try and get on that anchor there. So that's basically it. You just need to keep practicing. So it's going to be interesting there. So that's quite a lot. So we might need to put a bit more thinner on a clean end and smarten that up a little bit. So you want it to be relatively thin in terms of width, not massively stretched out. And you can always leave it for a little bit longer and try and dry it. So less is more. There you go. That's a bit in between the two. That would never be like that. That one's a bit wide. Try and thin it out a bit. So as you can see, after a while, try and zoom in a little bit for you, it starts to look a bit more realistic. So less is more, so that's the secret. And thanks to the gloss varnish, it flows nice and easily. I find it a little bit easier to do it on a nice warm day or evening. It seems to take, well, obviously the paint takes longer to dry, amazingly, for oil, but just take your time, come back to it, work your way around slowly and see how you get on. You can do it with the dry end of a cotton bud. I've tried that a few times, especially if you've got a wider area. But I'd say for starters, just have a go and see how you get on. So if you've got any other tips or ways of doing it, I'd love to hear from you. As I said at the start, this is just my way, it's not the definitive way, but I'd love to know what other people do. It's always good to learn new skills. And yeah, thanks for watching. If you did enjoy it, give it a thumbs up, it's much appreciated, or consider subscribing. And yeah, thanks for watching and I'll speak to you soon. Take care, bye bye.